Aloha, namaste. This is Radha, and I'm here to talk about our full moon lunar eclipse that is happening this this Sunday and Monday, the 24th and 25th of March. Here in Hawaii, it's going to be the night of the 24th. So it's going to be happening at 9 p.m. is like the max point of the eclipse, which is when the moon and sun are exactly across from each other in this full moon. The entire range of the eclipse will be from 6:53 p.m. until 11:32 p.m. Here, and it will be visible, but of course it's a penumbral eclipse, so it won't be quite as dark as a full lunar eclipse. We'll just see a faint shadow of the Earth on the moon. But this is setting off our eclipse season, right? This is the first of the set of eclipses since the nodal axis has changed from Rahu into Pisces and Ketu into Virgo. So this is a very significant moment where we're really starting to feel these energies as they affect our luminaries, our moon and our sun. And of course, other planets too are involved. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen so you can see where we're at. We've had Mercury joined Rahu, the north node. Earlier this week, they were exact. And this is really starting to affect our communication. This is really starting to affect the way we receive information, the way we perceive people's words, the way we express our own words. And of course, Mercury always affects our devices, our computers, our phones, apps, different things. And Rahu has a different effect than, say, Mercury retrograde, which is also around the corner. Rahu has an effect of a lot of stops and starts, right? There's this flashing quality. So something might work for a minute and then not work. And it really exaggerates wherever it is. It really blows it up, magnifies it, and makes it seem bigger than it is. So we might hear something and think, oh my God, they mean this, and really perceive people's intentions behind what they're saying to be much more than what they actually are. This is the nature of Rahu. It's the nature of the nodes. They are illusory. They cause us, they're the Chaya Graha, the shadow planets. They cause us to see things in the normal world as otherworldly. And in the case of Rahu, we have this quality of really reading into things, and often not correctly. Rahu is new energy. There's a youthful quality to it. And just like an obstinate child, for those of you that are parents of obstinate children, where they don't listen, they just don't listen. It's like, I'm going to keep making my own mistake again and again. I'm going to skin that knee 15 times and I'm not going to listen to you, because I want to learn my own way. I want to learn on my own. And this is the energy of Rahu. So we do have a lot of stops and starts because we're not learning and we're trying again and again and again to open up this karma in this place in our chart. And of course, the sun is going to be moving closer and closer to Rahu in between this eclipse and the solar eclipse in 2 weeks from the 24th. So in this particular moment, we're reflecting on our moon here joined Ketu, the south node. Ketu has a very different energy than Rahu. Ketu is where we're piercing, penetrative. It is old karma. It's where we have all this wisdom and all this knowledge, but no head to engage. We're not interested. It's somewhere we're not looking. And often Ketu has an erratic energy to it. Whereas with Rahu, we're going out and creating karma and making things happen. With Ketu, we're avoiding. And we're actively avoiding, meaning it's coming up beneath the surface. And we're like, nope, I'm not looking at that. I refuse to look at that thing. And what happens is that then when there's a moment like an eclipse or another kind of transit that really activates it, or if it's coming up through dasha cycles in your chart, it explodes from underneath the surface. And we're forced to look at the area that we haven't wanted to look at. When the moon is joined Ketu in particular, we get that way around our feelings, around our emotions, around our inner world. We become avoidant of that and ignoring the truth of what's coming up from underneath the surface. This is happening in Virgo, the full moon. The sun and Mercury are in Pisces. So we have a quality in Virgo of already not really necessarily wanting to look at the things that are dark or unpleasant, unclean. We want everything to be perfect. Virgo's the sign of purity. And ultimately, our goal here is to try to make everything as pure as possible. Pure is this pristine state of like when we're first born, right? But the minute we're out, things start happening and we're not pure anymore. And this constant desire to get back to that state of purity causes a lot of stress in Virgo already. And we've been sitting with K2 here since November 28th, right? We've had this axis since the end of November. And it really can bring up our more critical nature because Virgo already has that quality of being critical, of noticing what's not right. There's a spot on the floor. Oh, I see that spot and I want it to be clean. There's something that's not perfect in the way I look. I'm fixating on that. There's something that's not perfect about the way I did something, the way I wrote that paper or the way I did that thing for my work task, and I'm fixated on it. And K2 has this quality of also fixating on exactly what's wrong, pinpointing the exact thing that's wrong, and making that overwhelm anything that might be right, anything that might be working. So this is a time to really look at our personal experience with our critical nature and our criticism, not just of ourselves, but of others. But I think that it really begins with our criticism of ourself. And particularly with the moon, it's our inner self. It's our most vulnerable self, our most intimate self. And having just personally experienced K2 traversing over my natal moon before this transit when he was in Libra, it's really, it's a kind of depression that's a little bit different than what we might associate with depression. Rather than being absorbed completely with our feelings, we almost feel like we don't care at all. There's a quality of just not caring. And that can be almost more dangerous than really wallowing in it. When we see transits of the moon going through Scorpio and everyone gets very dramatic and traumatic, there can be a wallowing nature, and it's a drama that's being played out in the world around us. In this case, it's a drama that doesn't even take place at all. It's a complete avoidance. It's like, that kind of absurdist theater where the play is just man and woman at birthday party. And, I'm thinking of like Harold Pinter's plays, and there's just nothing really takes place. The words are just of the surface, and there's no quality of emotion at all. So this is one of the things we're going to be working with. And of course, it really matters what part of your chart this is in. And that's why I do in my Patreon group these forecasts for all the signs, because it really is going to be a different experience for each of us. If you are an Aries rising, this is your 6th house. If you're a Taurus rising, this is your 5th house. And of course, the axis is then going to represent the other side of that. This is going to be the 12th house for Aries people. They're really trying to open up karma around letting go and escaping. And K2's over there like, you're avoiding the details, but they're going to come up, right? The details are going to come up, particularly around their home, because the moon is their 4th lord. And so I do this breakdown for everybody, and I've done it in my stars report already for this week, so people can be prepared for this eclipse, because it's so important. And I'm also going to host a live discussion where people can ask any questions they have around their chart and this eclipse on Friday, which is tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. Hawaii time. So if you're not already a member, you can get a free trial membership and join. But I'm going to continue talking here about this moment in time that we have. So in this moment, we still have Mercury here in Pisces and going to be a part of this reflection on the moon. Mercury is debilitated in Pisces. We have a really hard time allowing our thoughts to find their home, allowing our words to find their precision when Mercury is in Pisces, because it's where everything is everything. Everything's part of the one. We're in this merging sea of all things being. And in the case of Mercury, we're reckoning with truth, right? Truth versus fiction. What is truth? We have discernment with Mercury. And our discernment can get very muddied in the waters of Pisces because everything is everything. And on some level, that's true. But when it comes to the use of language and the use of devices and the use of these things that we have constructed in order to communicate with one another, it becomes difficult. If we think of a golden age, you know, in Satya Yuga, when we're all in our highest self, telepathy would be very profound here. And in that case, we might find a lot of functionality with this oneness and Mercury. For people like I have Mercury in Pisces, for people who have very spiritual paths and want to communicate things of spirit, it can be very helpful. It can be very helpful for creative people, but it's difficult for basic communication. There's a lot of wires that can get crossed in the process. And particularly when you see that it's the ruler of this moon and K2 in Virgo. Virgo is ruled by Mercury, and it's where Mercury's exalted, where everything becomes very mechanical and like this, I'm saying this thing and this is exactly what I mean, right? There's no allegories happening or you know, alluding to things or creating oneness with everything. We're separating things very consciously in Virgo. This goes in this drawer, this goes in this drawer. That's organization. Everything can't just be everywhere. And so having the ruler be debilitated in Mercury is going to create even more confusion for us, because rather than just being able to pinpoint and have that clarity that Virgo and K2 both want and have, I wouldn't say K2 wants anything, but that K2 just naturally has that clarity on what's wrong, there can be confusion. It can feel messy, and that can add to the quality of disgust or pain that we might feel in this moment. Now, right after the eclipse, so like on the 25th, but like I said, it's the 25th for many people. I'll look at the hours of this. Okay, well, okay, there we go. Mercury moved into, and I missed exactly when that happened, but it moved into Aries on the 25th. It looks like it happened right about noon Hawaii time. So a little bit later in the afternoon, once you get to Pacific time and thereafter. Hawaii time is -10 UTC. And there are some islands, like I think maybe the Marshall Islands, or there's some place where there's a cutoff on the date and they have -12, -12. But other than that, this is one of the last time zones there is. So pretty much everyone's later than I am here when I'm talking. And I reference Pacific time because it's only 3 hours in this daylight savings portal, 3 hours later. So we then have Mercury moving into Aries right after this. And it's interesting because Mercury is going to then begin its retrograde cycle on the 1st and then move retrograde back into Pisces right after the eclipse on April 8th, right after our solar eclipse. So we have this moment where Mercury's just here for the eclipse and then moving out and then moving back in again. And it's, you know, the ruler of Virgo. So it is really affecting not just on this lunar eclipse, it's affecting the most because it's actually in Pisces for it and it's the ruler of the lunar eclipse, but it's still the ruler of K2 this whole time. And Mercury has so much to do with our capacity to relate to others in this world. It's one of the fundamental planets of how we're engaging in this world. And so the confusion that comes just from the retrograde cycle alone, which I'm sure will be the thing that gets all of the press on what's happening, is a lot, right? There's always that delay and that backup. But with Rahu, it's much more confusing and there's much more exaggeration around it. It's very different from a normal retrograde cycle. And even when Mercury's in Aries, it's still very close degrees to the Rahu. So we can see that. And as the sun moves later into the sign, it'll be closer to the sun as well. And when Mercury's close to the sun, we feel like we're not being heard. So there's confusion. We're exaggerating what other people are saying. We feel like we're not being heard. And there's this movement into retrograde where things are delayed. So problems will abound with all of our devices and also with our capacity to relate to one another. And it's really important to understand that when we're going in, because everyone's experiencing that. So we're all having this, you know, fritz in our communication. Venus will be moving soon, but for now she's still joined this stellium here in Aquarius with Saturn and Mars. And we see that there's a lot of maybe feelings of pressure on our relationships already because of Saturn's proximity to Venus. So we can feel pressure on our relationships, pressure to commit. Saturn and Venus are friendly, but Saturn's still a bit of a wet rag on happiness and joy and pleasure. And Venus is getting its happiness and joy and pleasure from community right now, from the things that connect us to everyone else in society. And Saturn's like, yes, but you got to do the work, but you got to do this. It's bringing in that level of humility, hard work, and pressure from time and fear that can rise from that. And then Saturn and Mars have an inimical relationship. They can be very challenging together. And that feeling of fear really works against our feelings of courage that Mars can bring out. And Mars doesn't really do that well in Aquarius. We have a tendency to be fighting over social issues and finding the division rather than the unity. Rather than working towards the cause or finding what connects us all, we want to draw lines of division. We want to fight. And so this is something to be aware of as well. Now, this lunar eclipse is the marking of Holi, the Indian holiday that celebrates bringing in of spring, right? The Indian holidays are always represented on new moons or full moons, and this one is a full moon one, and it's bringing in the birth of spring, and it's also the victory of good over evil. The story of Holi is coming from this little boy named Prahlad. He was a very devotional boy. From the moment he was born, he was obsessed with Vishnu, and all he would do was pray all day long. And his father was an asura, a being without light, who had received a boon from, using austerity, the practice of focusing on something in order to receive a city, in order to receive power, but not having any devotion. So he kept building and building this empire and this palace. I have to plug in my computer here, it's going to go out. He kept building up his power, but he didn't have anything he was devoted to. He didn't have love in his heart. And so he amassed a lot of wealth and yet was continuing to try to build his empire and did not like the fact that his son was so devotional to Vishnu. Pardon me. So he kept trying to kill his son. This was his plan, was like, this guy, he can't be my child because he's not devoted to me and my path of amassing more and more and more. He's devoted to Vishnu, and that's against me. And so he tried several different things in order to kill his son, and none of them worked. And finally, he took his sister Holika, and she had a special boon from Agni, the fire god, where she couldn't get burned. And so he put her on a chair with Prahlad on her lap and then lit a fire around them. And he was thinking, of course, Holika won't be burned because she has this boon, but Prahlad will be burned. Well, what happened was Prahlad continued what he always did, which was just chant and pray, chant and pray, chant and pray, in full and complete faith and devotion. And Holika's boon was actually negated because she had somebody on her lap. And so Holika engulfed in flames and Prahlad survived. And Hiranyakashipu, the king, the father of Prahlad, was so furious. He starts raging around his palace, taking his cane and hitting all the pillars. He's like, Vishnu's in everything? Oh, he's in everything. Is he in this? Is he in this? And he starts hitting everything, and he hits one pillar, and out bursts Narasimha, which is the form of Vishnu as half lion, half man, or half god. And he bursts out, and he takes Hiranyakashipu and brings him to the threshold of the house. Now, the boon that Hiranyakashipu had was that he could not be killed by a man. He could not be killed by a beast. He could not be killed at night. He could not be killed in the day. He could not be killed inside. He could not be killed outside. Always with the boons, there has to be a caveat, because all of the demons, all of the asuras want immortality, but they can't have that. They can't have immortality. So they work around it by they can't be killed in any way, right? So he found all these ways in which he cannot be killed for his boon. Well, Narasimha is half beast, half man. And he comes at dusk when it's not day and it's not night. and he kills him on the threshold of the house. So it's not inside and it's not outside. It's right in between. And this is the end of Hiranyakashap. And so it's the victory of the good over the evil. And so I hope you have a happy Holi. It's also the festival of colors. Many people celebrate the bringing together of Radha and Krishna and the bringing in of spring, which even here in Hawaii, we could really use. It's been quite a rainy winter for us. So blessings on your Holi, blessings on your beginning of your eclipse cycle, and may you really receive the messages that are powerful and potent in this moment for you, and not allow yourself to get caught up in the delusion and illusion of everything that is not truth. Namaste.